Today, we're presenting the shift to B2B e-commerce trends and best practices. We are here with Tim Harris, Chief Strategy Officer at Arbella Technologies, and Richard Lee, Product Evangelist at Dynamic Web. So without further ado, let's get started. Tim, over to you.
Thanks, Lauren. So, I mean, what a year for e-commerce. The pandemic certainly has changed the world around us in many ways. And I think one of the biggest impacts to our probably day-to-day lives are our online ordering that we've gone through. But this affects not only us from a B2C space, it's actually really changed the B2B world as well. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the e-commerce trends and best practices. Why today's B2B buyers prefer to purchase online, and driving internal and external adoption. So a little bit about Arbella. We are a inner circle member with Microsoft. We have pretty much gold competencies across the Microsoft stack. And we've got over 250 resources across Canada and the United States and Europe. We were managing over 26,000 seats of Microsoft Dynamics today, and that's the cloud version. And we kind of represent really the full Microsoft stack, everything from your business applications to your data and analytics on Azure, as well as the CRM components. And then we work with our partners at Dynamic Web through the e-commerce space as well. To really help with our organizations specifically, and distribution, manufacturing, and some of those spaces. So let's go to the next slide. So it's pretty interesting. The global pandemic has really certainly had an initial collapse of the economy and then an adjustment in the economy. We saw massive supply chain disruptions. The whole term of shelter in place, and what that meant to consumers out there, and then our phased reopenings. We had employee safety that was a big concern for people, and then our consumer habits were changing as well. And businesses really were scrambling to adopt new business models, streamlining their operations and reducing costs, and stabilizing their supply chains and putting redundancy in, and then all while trying to make sure that their employees were safe while doing so. And if you look at just some of the crazy changes that happened in the e-commerce space, like if you just look at some of the big retailers, the Walmarts, Amazons, Home Depots, etc., you can see their e-commerce versus their comparable growth in the brick and mortar space. I mean, we're seeing over 100% growth in that particular area. So it's definitely a huge trend in the market, and we're seeing more and more of this coming into the B2B space. Next slide. So Forbes had a couple statistics under e-commerce under COVID. So if you look at what happened during the COVID times, there was a $52 billion increase overall in online spending. There was a 75% increase on Memorial Day alone last year, from 2 billion to 3.5 billion. And there was a 10% increase in mobile sales, which means people are starting to buy more and more on the mobile devices. And of course, we're all pretty familiar these days with your buy online and pick up in store. There was over 195% increase in that curbside pickup type of approach. So all this to say is that this has really changed the way that organizations need to look at things. And I think if you look at the volatility chart of what the percentage changes are across some of these industries, you see things like auto and vehicles, increasing by 75%, business and industrial increasing by 70%. And then you go into some of the more consumer-based items like books and literature, it's almost 200% growth. But you're definitely seeing huge growth even in that B2B space in those types of products. So next slide. So if you look at it from a Microsoft perspective, they kind of break it down into 5 major categories that you look at when you think about e-commerce. So obviously one of them is engaging with customers across multiple channels. So not only do you need to have an e-commerce presence, but you need to integrate that with your call center. You need to make sure that it translates into your will calls or your retail locations. You need to build up that loyalty and exceed expectations. I think we're all used to, and I hate to use the word, but the Amazonification of the world. That loyalty we have to Amazon because of the way that they interact with us, easy returns, simplicity and over communication of status updates, the ability to manage your account very simply and easily. All these things have set expectations in our consumer market that are now translating to demand in our business market. So we're seeing that you have to kind of adopt that. You have to have an understanding of the B2C world to really truly service the B2B world, because at the end of the day, we're all individuals that go through these e-commerce experience and have the same demands in the business world as well. So getting everything built and run on a digital commerce is obviously a core component, and streamlining your operations to optimize your retail operations. So a lot of this comes to that friction-free commerce experience. We talked about that Amazonification, optimizing your back office operations to make sure that it's integrated with your commerce demand. Artificial intelligence and machine learning driving things that we'll talk a little bit about later, and getting the flexibility and security. And obviously security is a major concern for any business nowadays. So building it on a platform that's secure and trusted is of critical importance to organizations, especially when you're dealing with consumer data. You've got compliance around GDPR, CAN spam, and various other elements out there. Next slide. So why today's B2B people feel this is really important? So I think one of the underrated elements out there is the importance of your CRM application as it relates to your e-commerce experience. So for B2B sellers, often the commerce platform is leveraged not by direct end customers, but the same rules apply to things like abandoned shopping carts. You might have a dealer that's getting in there and configuring products. Did someone abandon that configuration? Why did they abandon that configuration? So the average abandonment rate is like over 63%. And really, unexpected costs are responsible for 56% of the abandoned carts. So if you think about shipping costs, if you think about add-on charges that take place, people will build something, they get a price, they get to the shopping cart, and suddenly taxes and shipping costs and all these other charges get added to it. And then they basically 56% of that abandonment rate is related to those additional charges that they weren't expecting. So what can you do to try to build that into your costing up front so it's not a surprise when you get to that final step for conversion? 43% are related to high shipping costs. And then the follow-up emails on abandoned shopping carts have a 43% open rate and a 21% click-through rate. So that means that just a simple thing of saying, okay, if the shopping cart is abandoned, we email them and say, hey, you left this in your cart. Do you want to come back and execute against this, or provide a discount, or whatever it might be. Opening those emails have a certain effect, but getting them to click through it and actually action that is still, something that needs to be tweaked out there. And then 42% of buyers in the B2B believe they didn't get answers fast enough out there today, and 31% indicate that sellers don't follow up unless they're asked. So why is CRM important here? Because we want to be able to track what's going on your website. We want to understand what our customer is doing. We want to understand when our customer did not complete a transaction. And then we want to have a high touch type of service where we're proactively calling into that customer and said, hey, I see you're trying to configure a very complex product. How can I help you, get through the configuration and make sure you have all that information to get to the cost that you need. And I think what we've seen with some of our customers out there, when we have that high touch type of process, your conversion on the shopping cart abandonment actually goes a lot higher. So it's that CRM component, the good call center, the ability to follow up. When a quote is generated, and oftentimes in a B2B world, they look to get a quote, but then they need to actually convert that to an order. That follow up with your sales reps and so forth to get down to the actual close is critically important. So that integration between CRM and e-commerce is a very key element to ensuring that you have the success of your e-commerce site in the B2B space. So next slide. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. Chatbots. So chatbots, kind of going back to that previous question about not getting responses in a timely manner. We see that chatbots are really the preferred support method for millennials who are making up more and more of the buying decision these days. creating chatbots is becoming easier. So we have built-in, bot creation tools with the Power Platform that allow you to build your own bots without having to do a lot of coding. And you also need to understand when is the right time to hand off to a live agent in a seamless manner. So a lot of times the bot will collect some basic information up front and then point them maybe to some default resources. And if that doesn't solve their challenge, or you get to a point in the buying process where you need to hand it over to a live agent, that transition needs to be pretty seamless and pretty quick. People don't like waiting, so if you're using a bot, you end up waiting for more than a minute or two, you're basically going to lose that person. So that connection is really important. So 60% of customers have leveraged chatbots in the last 12 months, and 80% of online companies will have chatbots by 2021. So, we're obviously moved into 2021 now, and we're seeing, at least with our customer base, is a large demand for leveraging chatbots as a call deflection tool, as an ability to interact with customers that may not feel as comfortable with a phone call as they do trying to get a quick answer through chatting online. So next slide. So price optimization, it's really interesting, the world of price optimization. This happens to all of us on a daily basis. Amazon is constantly changing prices on products. We certainly see this in the airline industry. If you ever used, Google's flight tracker, you can put in a flight, in a destination, in a date range, and it'll tell you when prices are going up and down over time. So the travel industry has perfected this for years, based on the current demand, how many people are already on the plane, typical historical trends for that flight. They will fluctuate those prices up and down. And we started to see this in some other industries like steel, for instance, using price optimization in the steel industry, using it in medical devices, being able to increase prices over time in a small manner so that your client, as they perceive more value from your organization. There's a lot you can do around price optimization depending on where your customer is situated and where your competitors might be located. We dealt with a steel industry client that wanted to price optimize their quotes to customers based on where their competitors were geolocated against where they wanted to have the steel shipped. Because really one of the biggest costs in steel is the shipment. So they knew if their customers were closer, their costs would be lower. And in order to compete against them or maybe drive them out of the market, they used price optimization tools to ensure they still made a profit, but then price competitively against the market out there so they could win more business. So interesting things you can do with price optimization. And this can be built into your site natively and automatically adjust pricing based on the consumer that's logged into the site. So next slide. So obviously mobile, we all know, probably the first thing we look at in the morning when we wake up is our cell phone. Mobile trend is increasing for the commerce space as well. I don't think I've been on the Amazon website other than the mobile app on my phone in quite some time. And I think mobility is becoming a critical aspect. It's anytime, anywhere access to buying. You need to ensure that your website is optimized for mobility. And we need to optimize the experience for both desktop and mobile. And sometimes that experience is different. So making sure that you have that optimization at a mobile level that makes it easy to be able to browse around and navigate through your website is important. So they're predicting by this year, 54% of all sales will be done through the mobile experience versus the desktop and physical experiences. So it's certainly a very large trend, and you can see the trend line going up year after year here of what's going on out there. Next slide. So education, as part of any e-commerce launch, is how do you attract people to your commerce site? And one of the great ways that organizations do this today is to provide educational, especially in the B2B space, about your product. So we have a number of building material clients out there today, and having videos and instructional things about how do you use these different applications. Why would you use it over a traditional application of that building material? How-to guides, installation guides, instructional videos, working with various influencers. So if you're in the building material industry, maybe you have Bob Villa go in and utilize your product in one of his videos. Leadership type postings, and then SEO is, of course, needs to be optimized for your content as well. And the concept is that a lot of times as a B2B e-commerce space, just getting people to understand and know your product is your biggest challenge. Getting to the website and converting once they believe in the product can be fairly simple with most of the e-commerce tools that are out there today. But how do you build up the demand, the knowledge about who you are as a brand, as a product, so that you can people can be driven to your website to actually execute that transaction? So e-commerce has to come with a marketing component that revolves around education and branding of your company and your products. Next slide. And then configurations. Configurators are wildly popular out there. I was just talking to some of the other panelists before this call. I recently got a Tesla, and obviously the configuration you go through on that website, you see it on all the auto websites. But pick your paint color, pick your wheels, pick your your options that you want, and these are all great things to do. But you can actually drill into the intelligence behind the configurators you're using on your website. So if you imagine as a car manufacturer, I want to know how many times does someone select the red color in our configurator. And a lot of times, if you think about your behavior on configurators out there today, you might say, okay, well, yeah, I want the 19-inch wheels versus the 21-inch wheels. Okay, so or I want the 21-inch wheels. So I click on the 21-inch wheels, and wow, those are $5,000 more. I don't perceive a $5,000 value of getting a 2 inches more on my wheel. So I'm going to go back to the 19-inch wheels, and then I'm going to go through and select the next option. Is that red color or that midnight silver metallic paint, is that worth $1,000 to me, or am I going to go with the standard white or black color that maybe doesn't have an additional cost? But each of those different decisions, as people interact with your configurator, they're selecting options and then deselecting options based on the prices being updated automatically. But you can actually log all those interactions and then use analytics on top of that to determine how many times did someone go and look at the alternative paint colors or wheels and then go back to the standard configuration. Because what that might indicate is, one, there's not a perceived value for that additional upsell, or maybe my cost is too high, or maybe the style or the colors that I'm using are not popular enough to get people to respond to those. So getting those intelligence about that can have a direct feedback into your engineers of your organization that are designing these products. And what options should we have? I think recently Tesla dropped the silver color out of their cars. I don't know if that was based on intelligence of their analytics or whether it was a costly paint upgrade or whatever that might be, but I'm sure they're using some sort of data to be able to make those decisions. So think about that as you're building your configurators. What kind of data and analytics can I get from that? And how can that feed back into my engineering department for my products to determine which features or options are popular out there and which ones maybe have a too high of a cost to drive the value for that configuration. Next slide. I think I only got 1 minute left here. I think it's the last one. Yeah, so the last one here is around warranty cards. So how do you connect with your end consumers out there? If you're selling through or selling, through like a Home Depot or a Costco or something like that, how do I connect to my end customers so that I can drive them to my website for a direct sale next time, or maybe a replacement part, or whatever that might be? So making it easy for your customer to register your products. We're seeing things in the RFID NFC space these days where you can literally put your phone up against your product and it'll pop open a screen where you can register your product. I surf, and my surfboards have embedded RFID chips now. And I basically put my phone against my board and it asks me to register my product. And now if I put my phone against that board, it tells me it's registered to Tim Harris and has my contact details. So if someone ever stole the board or whatever, I know exactly what the board was. I have all the dimensions. I have all the details about that. The same thing can happen with your product. You think if you're selling barbecues, for instance, being able to know the exact make, model, and year of that product helps you with replacement parts for it. So there's all kinds of things you can do to connect with your end customer and then drive them back to your website for those replacement parts or direct sales in the future. I think that's the final piece here. Yeah, just more details using text messaging and different ways that you can connect. So we'll hand over to Richard Lee, who's our product evangelist from Dynamic Web.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. And that was an awesome presentation. The point about, I mean, many great points, but the point about video usage is one we recognize at Dynamic Web for ourselves as well as our customers. Like, for example, I have some stats around video that I think our audience might find pertinent. 87% of online marketers use video content, so you're in good company to use it yourselves. And in 2019, video content accounted for 80% of consumer internet traffic. And we know that B2Bs are impacted by what consumers do online. Like Tim mentioned, it's not a company per se buying from you, but it's human beings that are likely have Facebook accounts and are on YouTube, etc. So let's make that a segue into my presentation on internal and external adoption. I'm Richard Lee, the product evangelist for Dynamic Web North America. And let's begin with a little bit about Dynamic Web. So we are an e-commerce suite, a platform. We got our start in Denmark in 1999 and have since then have branched out to all of these cities in 8 countries around the world. We have over 200 employees worldwide, 300 plus partners, and over 4,000 customers. Next slide, please. These pretty logos are brands. Behind them are companies that trust Dynamic Web for their e-commerce. Next slide, please. And here are just some reminders of the glorious benefits of e-commerce. It's cheaper to sell online with a self-service model. Of course, you're helping yourselves to buy it, and you're helping yourselves to things like returns and historical orders, etc. And every year, new B2B buyers are younger and expecting to buy online, so goodbye fax machine once and for all. And third, B2B e-commerce is rapidly growing, and likely your competition is benefiting from it already. Next slide. So the lack of adoption will lead to a failure in the digital transformation project that involves e-commerce. And it's not just the adoption of customers, it's actually beginning with internal users such as your sales force. Next slide, please. So that summary is exactly what Bob Barr, Managing Director and Global Lead of B2B e-commerce at Accenture said. Also from Accenture, they have a stat that is kind of alarming to me. 42% of organizations cite sales resistance as at the top area. So imagine if your analog role at a company was suddenly digitalized, you wouldn't feel like your job is that secure anymore. It's kind of threatened. Of course, we feel that way, we're human. So what can be done to energize the sales force around maybe those feelings that they're having themselves? Next slide. And you do what salespeople love, incentivize. You make it fun, yet competitive, which is part and parcel to sales. And you do that with gamification. And I'm not suggesting you make an app to do all of this stuff. You can actually make it fun and friendly with just using a whiteboard. And you're writing in the scores of sales reps that, let's say, for example, use impersonation. Impersonation is where you use your e-commerce site and you have a feature on there that allows a sales rep logging in as themselves and to assist customers that are struggling with the adoption, struggling with understanding how to use the system, all sorts of reasons, but enabling that sales force to do the hand-holding, to assist customers with making these purchases. They're not losing their jobs, they're just getting something that helps with expediting the sale. And them as a sales rep, they're also, evolving into more of a, assistance person, hand-holding, especially in that beginning phase of the transition. And then compensate the winner of your sales force with the most customer assists, or the customers producing the largest order value or the most line items per order. All of these metrics are not only measurable, but through this compensation effort for sales reps are achievable, and therefore, you know, winning, not, you're winning actually both sides of the coin. You're improving the adoption for the sales team, the internal folks, but you're also assisting the adoption of customers using the platform. So it's going to be win-win. Next slide, please. So, and now it's time to turn to the other side of the coin, which I alluded to, and where we're going to look at personalized outreach, incentives, UX, and marketing to drive customer adoption. Next slide. So showing personalized attention, again, providing hand-holding to help teach your customers how to use self-service is critical, right? It's not like a Field of Dreams. We build it and people show up and automatically know how to use it because they're using Amazon. You know, the portal that is made for your customers can be different, and depending who it is, maybe it's the 20-something, they already know how to use it. It's as if they were on your team and developing it. But more older folks were going to need more assistance. And this can be done in so many different ways until we get back fully in an office. You can use, you know, chat to do this. You can use Zoom. You can use impersonation, the phone, just in the hand holding, even though it might be more virtual these days. Next slide. So in addition to offering better prices online, so with your e-commerce site than anywhere else, maybe you have a store or it's sold in other stores, your own e-commerce site could offer the best prices. That's a great, you know, preferred online pricing to bring, and the incentive to bring people in to use the site. Additional incentives can include, let's say, discounts off the first 5 orders, or even enforcing usage of the self-service portal part of the site as the only way in which a return can be initiated. So no longer taking returns by phone, fax, or email. You must use the e-commerce site to initiate that return. So that's a great way of forcing people to use the site, because the tool or method is only available that way going forward. Next slide. Okay, so B2Bs are imitating B2C sites that have done whatever they've done to become successful. And often, as Tim pointed out, like the chat systems, whether they're run by bots or they're run by human beings, you know, that's historically a B2C thing, but of course people want immediacy. They want access to the information that's going to go from adding it to the cart to actually checking out. So there's less abandoned carts. So features like I like about Tim's presentation, the product videos, like I personally love unboxing videos, so I can, without having to revert to the manual, like I bought one of those inflatable hot tubs. The manual, sure, it's multi-pages, it's, you know, very detailed, but watching the unboxing video from somebody else in 5 major steps, I was able to assemble it without even turning the page on a manual. And then, of course, live chat, I use that often myself. And then the customer-facing configurators that Tim also pointed out are just some of the examples of how to wow and win customer adoption while also providing a superior experience online. Next slide, please. Okay, this is one of my favorite sections here, is the hyper-focused marketing. And so user segmentation is essential for targeted marketing for both B2B and B2B, B2Cs and B2Bs. But here I want to focus on the behavioral-based user segmentation. This behavior is all related to what is happening and not happening on the e-commerce site. So for example, there's a message to be sent to people who are buying the razor, but not the razor blades that you sell as well. So in an e-commerce suite like Dynamic Web, this behavioral analysis can access metrics from the ERP, website logs, and email metrics to produce a highly targeted marketing list that will bring in more online revenue. And we've seen this from customers using this feature that we call User Smart Search. Next slide, please. Okay, and that segues into my very last slide, yet favorite slide, because here we can see how our e-commerce suite in the middle is sandwiched between the ERP and CRM from Microsoft on the left side that we integrate to, and then the omni-channel that we publish to on the far right side. All right, so starting off with, let's say, the channels. The first four icons up there at the top, website, mobile, online, self-service portal, they all represent various aspects of your website, like the brochure side of your website, the e-commerce part of your website, the self-service portal part of your website, right? And then the email marketing, which includes the behavioral-based user segmentation I was just speaking about. And in addition to that, publishing to third-party marketplaces like Amazon, Wayfair, Google, and eBay. But then we can also publish out to social media as well as PDF files. So imagine that all of the, I mentioned like maybe, 4 general channels, but it's hundreds of channels. If there's a new social media site, that's another channel. If there's another third-party marketplace or one specific to your industry, that's another channel, and it's just going to keep growing over time. And if you use Channable or Channel Advisor, you know what I mean, that there are numerous channels that you may not be tapping into, but you can imagine that will only continue to grow. So, and then right in the center here, our core built-in components include a robust content management system. The mechanics for an amazing B2B and B2C e-commerce experience are all encapsulated inside of e-commerce. Intelligent email marketing, as well as other search engine optimization, split testing, lead management, all, basically encapsulated inside of marketing, because with dynamic web, more than just a shopping cart, which is a lot of what our competition basically is. We see that, there's a whole ecosystem inside of e-commerce or within your e-commerce site. Often other companies cobble together what we call a Frankenstack, or is known as a Frankenstack of, even though you cobble together, popular applications together and try to integrate them all together, it's a nightmare from a programming perspective to put it all together, from a security perspective to maintain those connections to make sure they're working. And that's why we have pre-baked a lot of features inside here, and when we have our updates happening twice a year in the minor release side, so many changes are improving this, including, let's say, our PIM, product information management, that when it got released and shortly after, in the few years of it being born into our solution, it's already up there in the enterprise level of features that we see with and PIM systems that have already been out there. But many PIMs are often standalone and integrate with a solution. It's really nice that a single integration point that we have to D365, Finance and Operations, and Business Central leverage. We can leverage that single integration point, raise the tide for all of these modules, and provide a very cohesive, self-integrated solution for customers to build their websites, as well as build their customers and grow that business. Even though they've been doing it for years, they're able to do that online. With that, thank you all for your time, and to Arbella for their partnership, and I'm open to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Tim and Richard. At this time, I would like to invite our attendees to ask questions. You can submit them in the questions window in your GoToWebinar control panel. And I do have a few questions here. The first one is, what if I don't have an e-commerce website today? Where should I start?
May I address that first? Okay, sure. Yeah, good question. I think the first thing is trying to understand, like, I assume you have an ERP already, so that's like kind of stage 1 of digital transformation. But with having a website is trying to identify, from your customers' perspectives. Not having a website is challenging because you're losing out on like the new generation, or even today, younger people coming into the market, working at your customers' sites or site, and they're unable to quickly place an order without doing it more of the analog way. So from that customer perspective, maybe addressing your customers, seeing what in an e-commerce solution or ordering online in a more simple way is going to benefit them. And maybe starting from that to come up with a decision on what kind of website to make. This way you're speaking to the choir, the people who bring business to you or purchase from you and create that revenue. Offering that online channel is going to expedite that. But as long as you are kind of fitting it to their needs, you're kind of already taking care of that adoption issue that people might encounter where customers don't want to use it. There, you're already addressing that first. I think it's a more strategic way of going about it than just, saying, all right, let's go with e-commerce, let's do it this way, and who cares what the customers think. That's my idea.
Thanks, Richard.
Good.
Tim, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Richard handled it really well.
Great. The next question is, we have a website today, but we're struggling to get the right conversions. What can I do to help convert people to buy?
Okay, I'll start with that. If I may, sounds e-commerce like.
Yeah.
Yeah, the conversions, right? So trying to look at if you have analytics around that, like if you can see, like, is it because there's shopping cart abandonment, or maybe they're not aware, how customers can be very narrow-minded. They buy the razor, but they don't know that you sell the razor blades as well, and they go to another company to buy that. So there's so many, the good news is that even if you use Google Analytics, you're seeing metrics to see where the shortfall is occurring, maybe leading up to purchasing, at purchasing, aftermarket purchasing, trying to find out what's going on over there, as well as picking up the phone and asking the customer directly, like, where are you struggling with things? And that's why maybe in the first question, that can help alleviate something like this. But this is a very common issue where conversion of, like, people aren't signing up for the webinar, people aren't doing this or that. And it's really a matter of a lot of analysis, and then a lot of testing and seeing, like, okay, maybe we put more smiling faces on the website and that'll help people to be happier and buy. Lots, and that's the beauty of marketing. You throw it on the wall, let something stick, focus on the ones that stuck, and then see about improving the stickiness of what you could do online.
Yeah.
Tim,
And
anything further?
yeah, just to add to that a little bit, I'm not sure how you're calculating your costs and whatnot, but there's a very large percentage of people that abandon shopping carts because of additional costs at the checkout. So that could be, expensive shipping costs. It could be, additional fees or taxes or whatever that might be. So the more you can try to upfront on your true costs, so that when they get to that end checkpoint, there's no additional surprise costs that will influence them to change their behavior. So that's one thing to look at. The second thing is, especially in a B2B space, is the connection back to CRM. Presumably in your B2B world, you probably had them log in, which means you know who they are. And to connect that back to your either inside sales team or even your outside sales team, depending on who owns that account, and follow up with them and say, hey, look, I saw you were on our website, you added some products to your cart, but you didn't actually push it through. What can I do to help answer questions you might have about our products? And especially in the B2B space, that personal touch, a lot of times it's complexity of product, it's application of product. Is this the right application for me? Or if it's on a configurator, maybe I don't have all the answers to all the questions in the configurator to get to the end result. But by having that follow-up back to your inside sales team, you can really drive that knowledge, and that might also help you in the future understand why they abandoned those carts, so that you can either simplify your configurator or do other things in your product line. And I think Richard alluded to this. The other thing is A/B testing. It's amazing, like just the color of your submit button, or little things that you can adjust on your page, how the information is presented. Having like A/B testing on some of that to see what gets a higher conversion rate can often assist you with increasing that click to sale.
The next question I have here is, do you support multiple currencies or multiple languages?
I'll let Richard answer that, but I think the answer is yes.
Yep, Tim wins at the end. That's the answer. I mean, hailing out of Denmark, country of 5 million people, and then being in LA, a city of 5 million people, they definitely are open to, I mean, the platform supports multiple languages, multiple currencies, and multiple taxes.
What if we have both B2B and B2C customers? How do we satisfy both groups?
I'll start with that one. The site, or let's say if you were to use dynamic web, it can support both B2B and B2C on the same website. And the way we distinguish it is through the login, looking up inside the ERP or CRM to identify, is this a cash customer or is this a account customer, let's say. And then it can treat them differently. So the B2C customer who logs in is seeing during checkout that they can pay by credit card, see their saved credit cards. Whereas the B2B customer buying on credit could see what their credit limit is, maybe what their invoices outstanding are, could pay their invoices online. So there, the differences are recognized by the login and can be showing different information depending on who's logged in.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the difference between a B2C and a B2B, right, is your B2B, you already own the customer, they already know who you are, and the focus is a little bit more on, their specialized pricing that you might have negotiated with them, or giving them live updates on the status of their tracking of that package, dealing with any commitments that you've made and so forth. So the great thing about the dynamic web platform is that it supports both scenarios, but under one platform. It just extends the functionality that exists in your ERP around specialized pricing and things like that for your customers. So I think that's a very positive thing where you can have one platform to manage both.
Great, and you mentioned pricing, Tim. There is another question here. What about custom pricing or different pricing tables for different customers? How do you accommodate that?
Yeah, so same thing. Much like you maintain your trade agreements or within Dynamics today, those can be exposed directly to Dynamic Web. So that login is associated to that customer, and then your pricing tables are basically inherited from there. So I think that just goes to kind of what Richard was saying earlier about the connectivity to the ERP and being able to support those multiple pricing tables.
Yeah, and that is definitely reflected online, so that they may know, or the buyer may know that we're buying that razor for $1, where it's others, even B2Bs might be paying $1.50. So that reflection could be shown with strikeout pricing, so it's emphasized, or it's just assumed that either based on quantity or discounts or quantity breaks or the specific pricing, all of that can be seen on screen. So it's not, it can go with saying, but emphasize on screen. So when they're buying, they know that it's just for them because who they are from the company and the agreement between two companies.
Both. It looks like that's all the questions we have for right now. Tim or Richard, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Richard, you want to go first?
I think that websites, owning one, e-commerce, no matter where you are in the stage of it, like the question of like don't have one to the question where we have one and we struggle with it, it's part and parcel to how things are. It's a work in progress. Your website today is not going to be your website tomorrow, unless of course that might happen where it's identical after 10 years, but really in done right, it's a constant improvement here and there, either through split tests. There's so many marketing technologies, some of which we have built into dynamic web and others that are external for some folks, but just know that it's a constant work in progress, and it sometimes never ends.
Yeah, and I think just getting started is important. Once you get started and then you start to analyze the patterns and the data and get feedback from your customers, you will make adjustments to it and it'll get better. But I don't think there's many businesses nowadays that can afford not to be in the e-commerce space. We're seeing the trends in the market. It's amazing, like the manufacturers that we deal with today, how so many of them want to go direct because of the supply chain challenges and the sell-through retail challenges they've had in the last year. So having a direct model as well as a sell-through model is important. The distributors out there that we have, I mean, e-commerce is becoming more and more critical to their business. So if you haven't started right now, it's almost a competitive disadvantage for you because your competitors are probably going down this route. So you have an opportunity, just get started, and you will always, as Richard said, you'll evolve it over time and you'll get smarter over time, but getting started is the first step. And I think, we have sort of a mini offer here at the end of this presentation. If you're interested in getting started with e-commerce, we'll send you an email where you can sign up to get a free digital strategy session from us, which will kind of help step through your scenarios as a business and maybe create an alignment of where you want to go and how you can achieve that. So we're happy to work with Dynamic Web and Arbella partner to produce a nice strategy session for you to get you started.
Great. Thank you so much. That's all we have for today. Thank you, Richard and Tim, for presenting today, and everyone else for joining this presentation. If you have any questions or would like to know more, please contact us at info@arbella.com.